If you want something you've never had, you must do something you've never done. The Renegade cohort for 2024 is open, but it won't be open for very long. Head to renegadeaccelerator.com and apply today. Today's guest is Dr. Melanie McNally. She's a renegade. She is a psychologist, specifically an expert for Gen Z, but she's also a peak performance coach and brain coach. She's my coach. I've been working with her and she has changed my life. Some of the tips and tricks and concepts in this conversation you will find so valuable, I promise, because I have, and as I'm applying them to my own life, it's really transformative. She also has a new book out called The Emotionally Intelligent Teen. Now, this is a book I wish I had when I was a teenager. If you are a parent of a teen or know one, make sure to get this book or send it along for your friend to check out. It is really powerful, and she knows how to communicate, what to communicate specifically to this generation. So without further ado, here's one of my favorite humans, Dr. Melanie McNally. Dr. Melanie McNally, I'm so excited to have you back, and welcome to the Why Not Now show. Let's hop right in the spirit of Why Not Now. Can you tell me about a time when you had a big decision to make and you had to ask yourself, why not now?
Yes. So my most recent one would actually be from you. When you asked me to do a workshop at the Renegade Summit in Miami, and I am not somebody who enjoys public speaking. And not only do I not enjoy it, I try and avoid it at all costs. And you had asked me to do this, and and you were very kind about it. It wasn't like, I had to do it or anything like that. You gave me a lot of outs, but I had to really pause and ask myself, like, if I'm going to, put myself out there in the world more with my work, with my books and with all the things I'm trying to do, I'm going to have to get comfortable talking in front of groups. I'm going to have to face this fear at some point. So why not do this now when I'm being asked to do it by somebody who I know is going to be very kind and compassionate. And I know it's going to be in front of a room full of people who are also going to be very kind and compassionate. So I was like, okay, why not now? Why not just do it and go for it? And I said, yes. And then I immediately had about 2 weeks worth of restless sleep and anxiety dreams and all kinds of regret. But I still was just like, nope, I'm doing it. This is the time. So I think that would be my most recent one.
Ugh, and look at what has happened since. But I think this is where, thank you for sharing that one, because it's so relevant, I think, to so many of us. So, you are an expert in your field. You are extremely good at what you do. And then we put ourselves into certain situations and it may not be what we do. But at the same time, I was just thinking, oh, yeah, it's a home run. She'll just rock up and have her, talk and help me or help everyone just like she helps me. And I didn't realize how much of a fear or there was anxiety around that. And you really worked through it using your own methods, right? So that was really cool to watch you apply your own training to yourself. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I didn't understand the extent of how big this was for you until I think we were just talking about this before we hit record, until you said one day, Amy Jo, I'm afraid people are going to ask for their money back. And I started laughing just flippantly because I thought you were kidding. And then I realized, no, you're serious. There's that level of anxiety and fear. And I've felt it too, in many times in different places and situations. So it was very real for you, right? And so can you talk through how you trained and rehearsed, but also then like the day of all the things?
Yes. So this is a very intense fear of mine. Probably I would say top of the list as far as things I don't want to do, things that bring me extreme anxiety and panic, like real true feelings of panic. So I don't normally speak in front of crowds or do presentations or workshops or anything like that. I've always been like more of a one-to-one or one to like a small group. That's just never been part of my experience. So having to really go outside my comfort zone, I literally sat down and I made a list of every single anxiety management tool that I would work with a client in the same situation. I was like, okay, what do I know from all the research and all my years of work? What do I know that helps people manage their anxiety? And I literally just wrote everything out, every tool, every strategy I could think of. And I was like, okay, I am doing all of these things for myself because this is so extreme for me. Like, I know I'm going to need to do this. So I did all kinds of prep ahead of time. I mean, I actually got on my desk treadmill and I walked at a really, really fast pace. So I would have all of the symptoms of panic and anxiety with the shortness of breath and being sweaty and hot. And I went through the entire presentation walking really, really fast because I needed my brain to know, like, okay, worst case scenario, even if you're panting and sweating, you can still get through the entire presentation. I did visualizations, I did mental rehearsals, I did all kinds of just like preparation of making sure I knew my slides like backwards and forwards. I thought of questions that people might have. I just really went into all of that prep work. And then the day of, or leading up to it, I had even asked if I could do something at the conference beforehand or at the summit beforehand. So I could kind of get in front of people again and just get that experience. So you allowed me to do that visualization the night before. So I was able to get in front of the crowd and just get comfortable. And then I had to do a lot of breathing exercises and some, more visualizations while I was there. But I was so I can't even tell you how proud I was of myself because I faced this fear. And not only did I get through it, I actually enjoyed myself. And I was able to even sit through the panel discussion beforehand and listen and like be engaged and be in the present moment where I had anticipated like leading up to my time on stage, I'm going to be in the bathroom, like getting sick. And I mean, I had packed Pepto Bismol. I was like really prepared to have full on just like anxiety stomach, total turmoil. And that didn't happen because of all the preparation I did beforehand and the day of and the night before. And so I ended up enjoying myself and having fun. And I'm like, oh my God, all of this stuff I've been teaching to people, it really truly works. If it works on me, it can work on anyone.
The response, it was one of the number one ranked, like everybody raved, and you could feel that and hear that, and you're still hearing feedback and seeing the results, the halo effect of your performance. So it also landed so powerfully with the Renegades. What I haven't told you, I don't think yet, but the day before, we're doing a walkthrough of the venue and of the stage and the space and the production team and our event planners and my team. And they're showing me, and they said, okay. And, Dr. Melanie requested she's going to sit in a chair and have a podium or at least have her computer there with her slides. And I go, no, she's not. And I wouldn't have said that if I didn't know you so well and working with you, but I was like, no, she's got this. And you did it. You owned it. It was amazing. I want to share kind of the reverse of that because I think it was literally 5 days before or less. I was getting ready to take the stage and I voice noted you in like this half panic SOS as you're like rehearsing on the treadmill for your keynote, probably. And I was in this total mind trip because I was getting ready to go on in front of like 800, 1,000 people. And they were all from another country and culture. So there was half of them didn't speak English and there was translation. And right before, the production team said, now, you know, don't take it personally, but this audience isn't going to respond likely. They're just, they're very stoic, and they're doesn't mean that they don't like what you're saying or it's not resonating. Just know, don't expect any energy back, any feedback loop. And I was like, okay. First of all, that wasn't my experience when I went around and met everyone, being the social butterfly that I like to be, to get to know, the lay of the land. So I had that. And then they said, and by the way, there's going to be probably a 3 to 5 second delay with the interpretation for the translator. And I was like, oh my gosh. So then I'm in my head and I voice noted you. And I was like, I don't know what to do. Can you give me one of your tricks? Do you remember what you said?
I think I told you to focus on the purpose, your purpose of like why you're there, what you have to offer, and to focus on like why they brought you in, like why they, what specifically you had to offer the audience.
Exactly. Exactly. And I did just that. I listened to your voice note and I went around to the coffee shop that's like on the other side of the venue. I met some more friends and said, will you sit at front row and smile at me? And they said, yes. And it was great. I mean, I walked out dancing and they stood up and they all danced. And it was so helpful to have you there to just get my head straight. That's exactly what I needed to focus on. And so we started working together, a while back, and I want to get to some of the amazing things you've done for me and how grateful I am. But before we get to your peak performance, like brain coach magic, can we go back to 4 years ago and you setting out to do things differently?
Yes. So when I joined Renegade back in September of 2019, I had this at the time, I had kind of my brick and mortar private practice located in the suburbs of Chicago. And my husband and I, we lived in the city in Chicago at the time. And I had this vision of like, we were going to the Upper Peninsula all the time, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. We were going there constantly for like long weekends and we really loved it. I was like, I want to one day like live up there and to be able to live in the woods, but I don't know how that would work because it's not very populated. I'm not going to be able to really have a, private practice up there. But I also want like more flexibility. I want to be able to offer more kinds of digital products, but I don't know what any of that looks like because I wasn't even on Instagram. I mean, I was so late to the game with Facebook. It's ridiculous. I mean, my friends literally had to force me to join Facebook because they're like, we're sick of having to update you every time we see you. Like, it'd be so much easier if you just saw what was going on in the world. So I was like living like a, I don't know, a 90-year-old person already. So I'm like, I don't have any experience in the digital world with like marketing or being on social media. I don't really know what my digital products would even look like. This is all really new to me, but I was listening to your podcast. I really enjoyed it. I found it extremely helpful. So I decided to join Renegade with the purpose of, I want to figure out how we can eventually move to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and I can, have more remote lifestyle and do things more virtually. So that was kind of my main goal. I didn't really know what exactly everything would look like. It was just kind of like this vision. And then, figuring out the details in the program and, where you kind of like walk us through things and it helped me kind of figure stuff out. And then obviously as I've gone, I've made a lot of like twists and turns along the way. But that was kind of the initial start there.
It's been so incredible to watch you own this dream and make it a reality of how you want to live your life. And it's a story, but it's kind of a fairy tale type of story, but a lot of action has been taken. And we were talking about how consistent you've been, and the momentum was big right out of the gate, but then it just seems like it's picked up this velocity and volume where, I mean, Fast Company's reaching out, Business Insider, you've got a book coming out in a couple of days and another one next year. And like, you're just kind of, it's so cool. But I love that you really thought through your day. Is if you follow Dr. Melanie on Instagram, which you should, because you never know if you're going to get some awesome like brain hack, like mental peak performance hack, or the new tracks in the snow of some wild animal that she's seen, which it has been a bear. You're living how you want to be living, and you design your day.
Yes, that visualization, that idea of, designing the day is such a powerful exercise of getting in touch of, when you think of how you want your actual day to look, you don't necessarily have to know your overall like purpose or your overall vision. When you can kind of just get into those, because a lot of times we work it backwards. We think of like the big purpose first and that big vision, and then we kind of work it down to the details. But the idea of like first starting with that detailed vision of what you want, just like on a day-to-day basis, is really powerful. Because when I did that exercise, I mean, I was visualizing, us waking up in the morning and taking the dogs for a hike through the woods and coming back and having breakfast. And then, I would maybe do some writing and then maybe we'd go kayaking and we'd come back and have lunch. And then maybe I would see a few clients and then we'd make dinner together and, sit outside and have a fire. Like I had this idea that incorporated some work and some writing and some outdoor time and, time with my husband, like all these like kind of little bits and pieces. And even though now my day it's kind of shifted in terms of what an ideal day looks like for me, but all of those elements are still part of it. Like I'm doing all of those things essentially almost on a daily basis.
It's so cool. And you're seeing is believing. And I think that's where a lot of people come to me when they are ready for a big transition or expansion with usually it's their career. Like I'm ready to go from here to here or to do a 180 or whatever. Which my first question is usually, what do you want your day to look like? Not what do you want to go build or do? Let's start there, because how we spend our days is how we spend our lives. So you went through that exercise with Renegade, and then I'm calling you earlier this year saying, hey, I've lost control of my day. Can you help me? Because this year, I'd say this year and a half has been one of the most purposeful and also challenging seasons of my life, where I'm relearning lessons in a big way that I thought I already fully knew. And my relationship with time and also just my relationship with myself has been a big part of it. But let's talk a little bit about some of the peak performance coaching and kind of brain coaching you do, and some of the application to me, where I think we had to start at the very basics again, because I'll be fully transparent here, and I know I haven't really done a share or update on my life in the last year and a half, probably on the podcast, but it has been a whirlwind, and I fall in love and get so obsessed and excited about what I do that I end up running out of gas, right? Burning myself out. And so I've been flirting with / I've crossed the line and come back, but at least I'm pulling myself back. I've been here before, but a lot further. And so you've really helped me rein it in, but also create some new habits that I didn't even have before. So I'm not strong arming this. But one of the things I think is so powerful is that exchange of, I just love our relationship because it feels fluid. Like we're constantly having that learning toggle, like, not equal value exchange. I'd say I'm getting a lot more value lately. But can we talk about kind of where we started? And a lot of it, I think, was around writing. With this next book that'll be coming out next year, is just trying to find more time in a day And finally, I realized getting up early and earlier is not a strategy. I was getting up at 4:30 to write, and you've now written a couple of books and have a couple more on the way. So, where should we start with this? I'm trying to think of our first conversations, but your knowledge about how we're wired in our minds and brains, like our neurochemistry, and that has been a big um, game changer for me to actually believe in the tactics and the methods.
Yes. So first, one thing you and I started with is looking at which areas you were struggling in the most. So I had you do kind of like a diagnosis or diagnostic test to kind of see, is it overwhelm? Is it exhaustion? Is it self-sabotage? Seeing which areas you're, rating the highest in. But I do want to say, first of all, to anyone who's out there listening, that no matter where you are, no matter how much you're struggling or how hard things seem or are for you right now, we are always capable of creating new pathways in our brain. Like that's what neuroplasticity is. It's our brain's ability to rewire and adapt itself based on new learning and new experiences. So whether that's learning from podcasts or books or, coaching or whatever that might be, our brain is constantly rewiring and adapting itself based on that new information that's coming in. So no matter what, no matter how drained somebody's feeling, I want them to know like there is always hope for change. Like our brain is amazing how it can do these things.
Quick note on that, because you just shared this with me in a recent session. I asked you, I've done a lot of talk therapy and I believe in it and will still continue, but I had asked you days ago, do I have to fully understand everything from the past and why I've done what I've done and or habits and patterns in order to change? My best friend and I were just talking about this weekend, and I told her about this. And what did you say?
No, that you absolutely don't have to always get to the root cause. And that's what I see people get kind of hung up in is they either want a diagnosis or they want to know like, why am I like this? Where did this come from? Is it that comment my mom made when I was 5? Or, do I have ADHD? And it's like, okay, sometimes that can be really helpful information, but you don't necessarily need that information to create change and to create new neural pathways in your brain. And we can create change with behavior. It doesn't have to be like we understand why, and now that creates change. Change usually comes from behavior and we can change our thoughts too behind that. Absolutely. And we want to work on changing our thoughts and how we think about things. But again, we don't have to necessarily know where those thoughts are rooted or where they started from originally.
I think this is huge, Dr. Melanie, because I wouldn't say that that's common knowledge for sure. And I would say, as a professional, as a psychologist, it's powerful to hear that, because it's not that there's been false advertising, but I think at times the narrative is, you need to understand and get to the root cause in order to really be able to change that systemic la di da. And this is really empowering, right? And encouraging to people, because I'm I'm probably proof that no, you can make progress forward and not fully. I'm such a forward person, right? It's good to reflect and I will, but I just don't want to get stuck there, right? Because that's not where I'm headed. So you've really helped me focus on the future versus the let's go back to your, not that that's not important. So thank you for sharing that. And with your point about neuroplasticity, I remember voice noting you saying, "Hey, I just listened or read somewhere that you can't create new neural pathways necessarily unless you're getting the adequate amount of sleep and this and that." And so I was like, huge light bulb. Okay, if that's not incentive to get my new sleep, to get more sleep and better sleep, I don't know what is, because that's where I want to go. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like how we can get those neural
Yes.
pathways kicking?
Yes, sleep is a huge part of it because so much like learning occurs during sleep. And it's not just like learning, but also our brain, like our memories are consolidating information during sleep. You can think of sleep as like your brain's chance to like edit information and to kind of like decide what it needs to discard, what it needs to keep. It's kind of filing things. It's, putting things in the correct spot. And then learning is getting encoded into your memory during that time. And that's where like those new neural pathways are starting to be formed. So sleep is an essential part of the process. We have these foundations for mental well-being, for mental wellness. And we have to have these foundational pieces in place. And so that's like sleep, that's hydration and food, social belonging or social connection is another one. But we have to have these foundational pieces in place, and then we can like build upon them. So if somebody's not getting enough sleep, or their sleep is like really inconsistent or they're struggling with it, that you have to start with those foundational pieces first, or if you're not getting enough water, you're not eating enough, that has to be the focus first before you start doing some of these other things, because otherwise these other things aren't really going to help because your brain doesn't have the fuel or it doesn't have the capacity to handle those changes.
That was a huge one for me. I want to show you my sleep score from last night. So I almost texted a screenshot to you this morning. I was kind of proud. It's 89% with Aura Ring. So that was huge. Like, okay, it doesn't matter how hard you're trying or how hard you're working and or how much effort or care or heart. If you don't have that, then you're just shooting yourself. Like it's literally a point of diminishing returns, right? And then I remember we were looking at, I think it was my September schedule, and the light bulb came on for me when you were telling me about recovery. I think I was on the road for 22 days. It was a really unique scenario. I'm usually not traveling that much, but you said you're building in recovery, right? And I'm like, what do you mean by that? Sleep? And can you explain how just like from a peak performance perspective, athletes, they don't perform all day, right?
No, and recovery, even so thinking of athletes, like recovery is part of training. When they're creating their training schedule, they are also including like their rest days or their active recovery days where maybe they're going to go, they go for a hike if it's a swimmer or whatever. They're going to do something different that's still active and, where they're out there moving their body, but it's not focused on the things that they normally do to train for swimming. So you need to have like, and I want to differentiate actually. So active recovery is not relaxation. Relaxation is very passive. Relaxation could be, watching a show on Netflix and, having pizza and hanging out with friends or whatever. It's very relaxing. It's very passive. Active recovery is where we are expanding our capacity so that we can handle more stuff later on. So active recovery is, sleep is part of it because it is allowing ourselves to like expand our capacity to be able to handle more things to do tomorrow or more learning tomorrow or more training tomorrow. But active recovery also includes things like, massage, breath work, meditation, a sauna, steam room, could even be, cold water immersion or being out in nature. So it can be some of the things that can still be kind of fun, sometimes not, like cold water immersion isn't necessarily a fun experience, but it is allowing your body to expand its capacity. So it's kind of there's like healing that occurs, but then also you're expanding your ability to be able to handle more stuff tomorrow, whether it's more like physical or mental stuff that you have coming up. So active recovery has to be part of, any schedule for anybody who wants to be successful. Because
Mhm.
if you're just relying on relaxation, you're not expanding your capacity. Like you're getting some passive rest in, like watching Netflix and, chilling with your friends or whatever. You're getting some downtime in, but that's not doing anything to expand your capacity or your bandwidth. So if you can instead do something like we talked about, when you were on the road, like going out and, if that means taking a walk by the ocean or scheduling a massage, doing something before you go into relaxation, then that's a way to incorporate that active recovery into your day. And so you can incorporate it like in big chunks, or you can even do like little bits. I have clients who will do just like a 20-minute active recovery. Maybe they get off like a big call with some clients. They'll go for a walk outside and look up at the clouds. They're not going to listen to podcasts while they're doing it. They're not on walking meetings or anything like that. They're literally just engaged in the present moment, going for a walk. And now they've done that active recovery. So when they go back to finish their day, they've expanded their capacity. So now they can go back into the rest of their day and they've got fuel. They're ready to do more things as opposed to going back and feeling drained.
To perform again. I think that's really cool too, how, and you talked about this at Renegade Summit, of being really intentional about your process and sequence of events. And we can get into flow in a second here. Um, but kind of thinking through when even you exercise can be extremely strategic with your peak performance, right? So let's touch on that in a second. And I'll never forget, I think you're having me list out all of my tasks or area, like things I was doing. And this is all self-inflicted, by the way. This, like, nobody did anything to me. I've created this situation myself with getting kind of overprogrammed. And I always think, what is this here to teach me? What is this here to teach me? Versus why did this happen to me, or why me? And sometimes get there too quickly. But you had me list everything out, and then you're like, why are you doing that? So no, why? And you said you were talking about the cognitive load, right? And so I was like, well, you know, oftentimes I think, well, just because I can, or it's quick for me, or XYZ, but then it takes away from my capacity. So, I always talk about this concept in my mind, it clicks, where our bandwidth is 24 hours in a day, it's finite, we all have them. How we use them, we choose. And then our capacity is our potential, it's infinite. We can keep pushing and flying higher, right? So, like an airplane is more efficient at altitude because it belongs there, it requires less fuel. It's like what you're uniquely qualified to do up here, which I love living up here. Most of us do, right? And so, but what I've found is, like, I've tapped myself so much here, my 24 hours in a day, running around, that I've trapped myself here. And then I'm not learning or growing or exercising that unique superpower, right? So when you look at that, we've talked about hiring right now a bandwidth manager, capacity expander, their whole job, and you'll interview that. You'll probably be the final call of who gets the job. They're gonna have to train with you. But can you talk a little bit about, like, us identifying what we're uniquely qualified to do and how to really think of that cognitive load at capacity too, and free ourselves up more, like things that you have suggested to me to be able to adjust?
Yes. So a good way to think of cognitive load is like any additional information that you are carrying around in your brain and it's causing a load on your brain. So it can be as simple as remembering what you need to pick up at the grocery store later tonight. It doesn't have to be, cognitive loads aren't necessarily massive, and that's where people usually get pulled into it, is because they think it's like, oh, it's just a really small detail, I can remember that. But those really small details add up and they get heavier and heavier on your brain. Our
Mhm.
brains are designed to create ideas, not to keep track of them. That's like not their purpose. So they're not meant to be like an office, you know, with like post-it notes everywhere. That's not how they work well. So
Mhm.
we really want to offload anything that's adding to the load at all. So that's why, like, planners, I am such a big advocate of using a planner and putting down everything in your planner. Like, I mean, when you look at my planner, it's ridiculous. Like, I have it scheduled out on for my work days. I don't do it on my non-work days, but for my work days, I mean, I've got it scheduled, you know, when I'm waking up. I've got like my, you know, even my commute time to CrossFit is accounted for in there. You know, my when I'm showering and getting ready. So I can see realistically, first of all, can I fit everything that I want to do into my day? But then also, because I don't have to think, I can just now get up and I've got a plan to follow. I don't have to remember anything. So now I can focus on what's truly important, which is helping my clients. And I can really, you know, be focusing on those things. And I'm not having to keep track of anything extra. So if it's a grocery list, making sure that as soon as I think of what I need, it's just getting put on the grocery list. I'm not having to remember it. You know, I remember the morning when it really hit me, like the cognitive load, when because I get up early in the morning to write, because that's when I'm most alert and that's when it's most productive for me. So I get up early in the morning to write. And at the time I was getting up and we had adopted this new cat, Squeaky, and our dog Derby was obsessed with her. So Squeaky would come down the stairs and Derby would go running at the stairs and scratch at them trying to get her, and our stairs are wood. And so Derby would scratch him up. And every morning it was like this, like, oh, I've got to stop Derby. And it was just like this load on my brain of having to manage her while also trying to write. It wasn't even so much a distraction. It was just more of like, oh, I need to tell Derby to stop. And then I would go back to my writing. And then when I was like, well, this is actually a cognitive load issue for me. And I just like took sweatshirts and I tied them over the banister. So that way, when Derby jumps at Squeaky, her nails don't scratch the wood. And it was a really ugly solution, but it eliminated that cognitive load. So then I could just focus on writing in the morning. So it can be something as simple as that. It doesn't have to be this really huge thing. But once we reduce our load, it makes a world of difference because now we can focus on things that are going to move the needle forward in our day so much more quickly because we're not getting distracted with all these little details.
Renegades. The next Renegade cohort is open for enrollment, but it will not be open for very long. Head to renegadeaccelerator.com. This is our 11th cohort. We are so excited because we have women all over the world in every single industry, in every sector, female leaders, executives, founders, you name it. The amount of leverage and the amount of intellectual capital being exchanged is pretty incredible. Head to renegadeaccelerator.com to apply, and we'll explore together to see if this is a good fit for you. You might have been tracking over the last couple of years, and a lot of things have changed and developed within Renegade. We've grown. What hasn't changed is our fierce commitment to each other's goals. We still have a strong foundation in helping you build your personal brand online and offline so you can get more out of it, so you can get more out of your days, because getting up earlier and earlier is not a strategy. However, we've added to that. For example, public speaking is a huge way to leverage your personal brand and thought leadership. Not only do we focus on helping you become a better public speaker, but also the business side of public speaking, where you get paid and you get to increase your fee and those opportunities to get on bigger stages. That's what we're all about. Last year alone, we had Renegades take hundreds of stages, and we're so proud of them. In addition, we are getting women seats on cap tables as investors, board seats, and those spots on stages, which really increases your voice of authority as well as your ability to create your own wealth. We are educating about investment, providing access to deal flow that you typically wouldn't have, and opportunities to invest through Renegade Global Ventures. So we're democratizing the process and the access to deal flow, but also democratizing the flow of capital. It's so exciting. This has all become possible because the amount of leverage and power within this container at Renegade. We also have a Renegade multifamily office, which you have access to in partnership with Raymond James. Incredible benefits there. And in addition, you have access to each other, meaning this is not one to many or one to one, it's many to many, exponential opportunity for growth and leverage, introductions, new business, opportunities, and feedback, experience. Those are all part of what we offer at Renegade. So head to renegadeaccelerator.com and check out if you feel like it's for you. We'd love for you to apply and touch base with you soon. Our society, and especially women, we think we can do it all because we're pretty darn capable, but just because we can doesn't mean we should, right? And I think sometimes, we have to think about the value of an hour and what is the value of our time. We vote with our time, and even kind of getting it sometimes into literal dollars in the day. Or I have a mentor, Kenny Tomlin, and he said most people think they have to spend time to make money, but sometimes you need to spend some money to make time. And that could be delete or delegate things, or outsource. Or I'm like a delete delegate person. What can I delete delegate? But just even if there's a lot of travel coming up, or two of my biggest cognitive load things are like little personal things that I need to do, doctor's appointments, or um, you know, find something to wear for a keynote, or like not my favorite thing at all, or travel, which usually I have someone helping me, but I'm terrible at it. And it actually gives me more stress than a keynote and prepare and writing the book, and like the amount of weight on something so simple.
I remember when we were in Columbus, and when you and I were talking in Columbus, walking down the street, and you were telling me at that time you were managing your own travel schedule. And I was just like, what are you doing? Like, that is such a cognitive load issue. You do not need to be spending your time on that. That needs to be offloaded to somebody else. So that's so many details to remember.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And it makes sense when we think about where could that hour be spent, or even if it's with Lincoln, which that's actually the ideal, right? So I usually equate this to, is this taking time away from Lincoln versus, so that's huge. And can we talk about inbound communication and outbound too? Because that's another huge stress or anxiety. I think I might have screenshotted it and sent it to you, but I had like 250, what was it? I had 250 unread text messages in my um, inbox for text. And that's not like me, A. And B, I created that. Totally my fault. And there came a point where between that and email and direct messages and Slacks and all the multiple workspaces, I just am like, I just don't want to kind of almost like give up, right? You just like, oh, just turn it all off. And there's a boundaries lesson here, but also taking that back has been, and getting back more like perceived control has been huge. But the notifications and the access that we open up to other people and energy has been a pretty big eye opener of like, how did I create this? Right? Something so good has become bad because I'm now resentful of communication.
Yes. It's like we have to learn how to manage those distractions and to set limits and parameters around them. Being able to, even like doing something small, if it's turning off notifications on, everything, whether it's having notifications turned off for text messages or emails or whatever. So first of all, you are deciding when you're going to look at your phone. Your phone isn't making that decision for you, but then also setting parameters around when you're actually going to respond to things. when I'm scheduling out my day, that's one of the things that gets scheduled in there is a tech check. And that's when I go in and I'm looking at my email, I'm checking text messages, if I've missed phone calls, looking at DMs, all of that stuff in that one block of time, because otherwise it's so easy to just get pulled down. Because if I look at my email, there's gonna be something I have to respond to, but it's not a simple response. It's gonna, there's gonna be like 5 other things that requires. So you get sucked into this whole other area. And this is wild. It takes our brains 23 minutes to get back on track every time we're distracted by something or pulled away. And it doesn't have to be responding to an email. It can be the email notification popping up on the screen. That is enough to now, okay, I have to look at it and my brain has to process it. Even if I don't reply, I'm still thinking about it. And if I was in the middle of writing, I just now, like, I have to give myself 23 minutes to get back to where I was. And that's only 23 minutes if I can actually tune out all of the distractions again
Mm.
and get back into and allow my brain to kind of go through what it needs to go through to get into that state of flow. Like, that's a big chunk of time for a notification.
Huge. And you're probably getting cortisol like hits because of seeing the red number or, notification. So with and the multitasking, we used to just tout it so much, and it's actually so inefficient, right? Statistically, you lose so much momentum and
Yes.
efficiency going back and forth.
Yeah, and it's really funny too because people who think they are really good at multitasking are actually the people who are the worst at it. And this isn't like my personal opinion. This is what research has shown again and again. So it's really funny because you'll have people who will be like, "Oh, but I'm really good at multitasking. I know they say you shouldn't, but I'm actually really good at it." And it's like, actually, you're probably one of the ones who's the worst at it because we're not designed to do that, to go back and forth. And if you are multitasking, you're not going to be able to give anything really good input. So, like maybe you multitask, like, folding laundry and listening to a podcast. That's different, because folding laundry doesn't require a ton, but you wouldn't want to have a conversation with somebody and then at the same time you're like reading email or, trying to do something else. You're not going to be able to do it, or you're not going to be able to do it well.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest one, the biggest myths. With flow. Okay, let's talk about when you know when we think about, for me it used to be, okay, get the workout done in the morning because that's, it's done and it's over. But I'm like you, I like to write. I do like to write early in the morning. It's not a strategy to get up earlier. It doesn't mean stay up late, like, no, it just means that's part of your day, right? This isn't um free time. It's work. So, can you talk a little bit about flow, kind of 101, but also maybe some flow blockers? Because this has been huge too.
Thinking of flow, flow is so based on a lot of the neuroscience behind flow, first of all, is still fairly new. So flow is a concept that was like developed by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi back in like 1980. And then the neuroscience around this is still like underway. So I do want to just caveat it that it is kind of new stuff. But a lot of what they're figuring out is that there is a cycle of flow that we go through and that our brain goes through. So typically we start in the struggle phase, and this is where our brain is really in that like loading phase when you first start a task, when your brain is having to kind of figure out like what's going on, what it is that you're working on. That's when you're getting like cortisol released, and it's a little stressful, it's uncomfortable. When we're in that struggle phase, this is when it's really easy for us to get distracted. That's why we want to make sure we're minimizing distractions, because it's way too easy to do it. But then our brain goes through release, where we can actually encourage release by doing something like taking a little walk or hopping in the shower. But that can actually now cause us to go right into a state of flow. And flow is that block of time where you lose your sense of self, your sense of time. You are just like in it, you're like in the zone. and it feels really good and it's really you feel really productive, things feel really easy. But what happens is we have to figure out where it's easier for us to get through that struggle phase so we can go through struggle and release and into flow. And it's going to be different for different people. So you and I are very similar where we both really like to write in the morning. And, and I know I'm a morning person. You probably are too, if that's when you like to write. So that works well for us. For somebody else, the morning might be a nightmare for them to try and get into flow. That doesn't work with their natural biorhythm. So they might be better off doing it later in the evening or late afternoon. So you do have to know when you tend to be most alert,
Mhm.
because then it makes it easier to kind of go through that struggle phase and get into that state of flow. But then when you know that, you can get yourself into flow and you can really get the most productive work out of it. And, and you find that it's like really meaningful, easy work. And then once you come out of it, that's when you have to allow yourself to recover from it. You are one of those people who wants to go right back into the struggle phase and you want to force yourself back into flow again. But what happens if you try and do that, you don't have the neurochemistry to support it. You haven't allowed yourself to like replenish. So
Mm.
you want to make sure that you've built in that recovery phase where once you've kind of come out of flow, where you're going to take time to, it could be eating a nice lunch while not doing anything else. You're not on your phone, you're not having conversations, you're making lunch, or maybe you're listening to music. It's just kind of relaxing and enjoyable. Or maybe you go for a walk or you play with Lincoln. You're doing something that's just you're in the present moment, you're engaged, but you're not necessarily like thinking about work or, focused on work. And then that allows those neurochemicals to get replenished.
This is a big one for me because I think of it like riding a wave, and you know how you can't keep riding the wave, like, the wave is gonna end, but knowing when it's time to get off, it's like you're not riding the wave, you're not surfing anymore. Um, and then one thing question for you, so in my mind, and I know perceived control is a big thing for me because if I get stressed, I'll just start picking things up. It's like, what can I control? It's like, whether it's around the house or trying to get through emails or anything, but it's kind of like tabs in my mind. If there's a bunch of noise going on back here, I want to close it before I sit down to do something like work on it, rehearse a keynote or write. And sometimes there's just like, you're not going to get through that inbox, but you do need to sit your butt down and write. So, other than obviously closing it out, do you have any tricks for that of how to like put the noise over here, even if it's semi important noise or it's just kind of nagging noise, and focus over here when it's like this ticker is still going or like this tab is still open, taking up space and energy? Um, any tips for that?
Well, first of all, I would say, is there anything that you could offload so
Yeah.
that it's not taking that mental energy? So even if that means putting it on your to-do list or scheduling it into your day on like a later day in the week. So now your brain knows, okay, it's taken care of. It's scheduled for Friday at 1. We're good. So if you can offload anything to do that first before you even, try
Yeah.
and get going, but
Yeah.
then also to make sure that you are, well rested, that you're well fed, that you're hydrated, so that you have some of those core, you've got that fuel in place and you're also starting from like a good place. Because if you try and start from, if you try and write when you're exhausted or you got a really crappy night's sleep, it is going to be so much more challenging for you. But if you come at it where you are well rested or you're well fed, you're ready to go, it's much easier. So making sure that you have some of those foundational pieces in place too.
That's good. I love that. I think that's just one of my key constant learnings. The My inbox got so overwhelming months ago that I created a folder called DWTLNT. And it was like, deal with this later, not today. And I was like, select, 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 drag, drop. I've never opened that folder. I mean, and what does that tell me, right? It tells me I don't have to respond to everyone, right? But B, I'm probably allowing more noise in than I realize should be. So finding barriers one way or another is like what's going to get your attention. What's you know we vote with our time. So where are we going to vote? So that was a biggie. And having, I think I had my out of office email autoresponder on for like a year one time. And it was just a redirect. If you need this, go here. If you need this person, this. Um, but that it might be time to do that again. I did that for my mobile inbox, right? I didn't know you could do that until recently, where it's an autoresponder, and I started breathing easier. Like, I don't know. Nothing changed other than a couple buttons, but crazy. Okay, so let's talk about, I'd really like to talk about parenting with you. And let's talk parenting. I mean, you are an expert specifically with Gen Z, and you have your book, An Emotionally Intelligent Teen. You've been working with this generation for a long time. And also, so Nisha Anand, who's a renegade, introduced you to someone, right, that helped get you on the panel for the White House with mental health for youth, or what was that?
Yes. So yes, Nisha is amazing. She put me in contact. They were looking for, for individuals to speak. It was when Biden was first coming into the White House, and they were doing kind of like a listening tour, and they wanted certain topics to be covered. And youth mental health was one of those things. So she put me in contact with the White House officials who were organizing it. And so I was able to participate in that as a panelist, and just to present some information on, youth mental health, because we are in a crisis when it comes to youth mental health. It's really, really bad. I mean, when you look at the numbers as far as like depression and anxiety, hospitalizations, suicidality, like all of those things are much higher than they've been in the past.
But when you start thinking about this specific generation, I know you cover so many tips and pointers in your new book, An Emotionally Intelligent Teen. But what is different? Like, what are some of the things that you've noticed that may not resonate or be obvious to adults or parents?
So with current teens, the biggest issue that I see is that they've got great self-awareness. Teens today are extremely self-aware. They know what symptoms are, they know what their triggers are, they know all about, depression and anxiety, but they lack severely in the self-regulation department. So they don't know how to self-regulate themselves in a healthy and productive way. They know how to do it in more of like the unhealthy or really passive ways, which is usually just scrolling on social media or scrolling on their phones or watching videos. But that's not really self-regulation. That's not self-regulation. Is when we calm ourselves down internally, like we de-escalate ourselves. And it can be through self-talk, it can be through like self-soothing kinds of strategies. But what I found is that teens today, they don't know how to do that. They don't know how to de-escalate themselves other than using their phones. So when they feel really uncomfortable, the first thing they do is they pick up their phone or they watch a video. If they feel anxious, if they feel sad, if they're lonely, and oftentimes their phone will make them feel even worse. And so what I've been really focusing on with the teens I work with is trying to teach them, first of all, what it means to self-regulate and why the phone isn't a healthy tool to rely on. It's okay sometimes, but we don't want it to be our only source. And then how to build up like a toolbox of different things that they can do and use to calm themselves down and to learn how to manage discomfort, because that's, they're really lacking in that area.
It's so interesting. And you just wrote an awesome article in Psychology Today, which you are a contributor for, right? And I read it the other night, I couldn't sleep. And you gave some tactics, and this is for adults too, um, on self regulation. But I think one of the things that I took away, let's talk through some of those tactics, but I think you were making the point of self awareness is great. It's, a good start. But if you don't have self regulation with self awareness, it can actually be worse and cause more anxiety because you aren't fixing the problem or the challenge. So some of the tactics that you shared that could be for young adults or, you know, 44-year-olds, were I've used some of these lately.
Yes, the breathing is a really big one. So learning how to just slow down our breathing and calm ourselves down. So that can be just doing a nice slow inhale through our nose and then a really long, slow exhale through our mouth, and just making the exhale like 2 counts longer than the inhale. So it doesn't have to, we don't have to do anything wild or any sort of like, wild breathing exercise. It can literally just be making our exhale 2 counts longer. But that's a way to just kind of get ourselves to slow down a little bit. But other great self-regulation tools are, you know, taking a break from the situation. So whatever it is that's upsetting us, and it doesn't mean like we're avoiding, it doesn't mean that like we're leaving and now we're done with it, but actually taking a break. And then it could be going outside and practicing some mindfulness. So I'm really going to be engaged in the present moment. I'm going to focus on what I hear, what I see, what I smell. I'm going to really focus on those things. And then I'm going to come back to the situation. So it's not about, because a lot of times people think self-regulation, it needs to take me, if I'm at like a 98, out of 100, like I am so dysregulated, I'm so upset, I'm at a 98. They think that self-regulation needs to bring them back down to a 0. And that's not the case. When we're trying to self-regulate, it's just about bringing ourselves down enough so that I can now deal with the situation in a way that's like a little bit healthier. So instead of like blowing up at my partner or saying something really cruel and nasty, I've calmed myself down enough so that I can just say, I feel really hurt by X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just bringing ourselves down enough so that we can deal with the situation in a healthier way.
I think this is amazing for parents too, like, especially if you have toddlers or, young children who are learning to self-regulate, period, all day, every day. And I think the other one was just the being in the present moment, like literally feeling my feet or thinking about what sounds I'm hearing, those types of things. But these are things that I never learned, right? I mean, we kind of pick up along the way. You have to learn, but how valuable, for you to be able to share this, and also from a growth mindset perspective. And I know we're going to wrap up, but let's definitely, this is not the end. This is just the beginning. Hopefully you'll be back early and often with me. Um, but the growth mindset, just notion of really understanding what that means in terms of rewarding ourselves more with the effort, right? The journey, not just the end result outcome. That's been huge as a parent for me, like huge.
Yes. And, and especially for parents, because what research shows is that mindset is created in earlier childhood, and it usually comes from parenting and from school. So parents really have a chance to teach their children, or to like mold more of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. So a fixed mindset is very much like, this is how I am. I'm either good at it or I'm bad at it. It's very just like I'm bad at math. I'm not an artist. Whereas a growth mindset is more of, I'm still developing these skills and abilities. Or
Mhm.
this is an area where I'm growing or I'm building, but it's not like that kind of black and white. Nope, this is just how I am. So instead of saying I'm bad at math, it might be this unit in math is really difficult for me, or I'm still building my skills in math. I'm still learning how to become stronger in math.
Mhm.
And with parents, so like you mentioned, praising effort is
Mhm.
huge. So when you notice your child trying something, that's what you want to focus on, not the end result. You don't want to focus on like the grade they got or the score or anything like that, but just like, wow, I noticed that you put in a lot of effort on that. Like,
Yeah.
how do you feel about the amount of effort you put in? Are you proud of yourself? Are you proud of what you did? And so you're getting them to focus in on more of that process versus the end result. And if your child is at a school where it's very results driven, where the school is like really focused on grades and GPAs, you can offset that, at home by making your home culture more about effort. Because I have to say, I've seen so many teens where they got great grades in high school. They figured out like what they needed to do to maintain a certain GPA or to get a certain grade, but they didn't actually really learn how to study or put in effort. And so then they get to college and now things are really difficult, and they knew how to do the bare minimum in high school to get by, but now they don't know how to study. And now they have to figure that out when they're in college, and it's much more challenging. So you want to, it doesn't matter what the grade is, even if they're getting 100%. It's like, well, but did you put in effort? How did you learn that information? What did you do to, build in that area?
It's so cool. It's been a huge change in our household, just more intentional, like playing a matching game, and all of a sudden Lincoln maybe doesn't get one right. And he's like, oh, I didn't get it. I'm like, yeah, but I noticed that you really tried hard and look at that effort. And actually, you did get it quicker than the last time. Or, just, and then the studies showing that what is it when children with more of a growth mindset that are rewarded with effort, wasn't it like there were two tests and they ended up actually in the long run they did a lot better and performed a lot better because they were able to push through probably the struggle or the learning uncomfort.
100%. There's higher academic achievement attached to a growth mindset versus fixed, for sure. But but I don't want parents to focus on like, oh, that's the result I want in getting it. So it's more of like, yeah, because it helps when we have a growth mindset, when we're focused on like what we're able to do, or I can get through hard things, then I'm going to go outside my comfort zone a lot more. I'm going to challenge myself. I'm going to believe I'm going to have self-efficacy. So I'm going to believe in my ability to figure things out. And that's what we really want to instill in children, is like their belief and their ability to handle hard things.
Amazing. And then we just stretch like that capacity, potential. I want to wrap up here with just one final quick question with kind of bringing it back around. And thank you, by the way, for all the help that you've not only given me, and it's really life changing, truly, but also all the renegades and the world. You're so genuine in your care and very, very valuable to us. So, question for you: if you were to go back to yourself right before you joined Renegade, and have a conversation and say something to yourself as you're dreaming and thinking maybe someday, many years down the road, I'll be able to get to the cabin and live in the cabin in the woods, which happened in like, I think a year or something. Knowing what you know now, what would you have said to yourself in that moment?
I think I probably would have told myself, it's probably something that you've said to me. Um, like, you've got to bet on yourself, and you need to believe in yourself that like you're going to figure things out. Like that would have pushed me even more. Um, I feel like, but I think I've heard that from you. I think you've really encouraged me to like bet on myself and to believe in myself. So I think that's like a now I've internalized that message.
Well, it's full circle because you've done the same for me. And thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This is hopefully, going to continue and you'll be a reoccurring guest. Congratulations on everything. And we'll make sure all of your links are in the show notes, of course. But I just want to thank you one more time.
Thank you so much.